Expressionism by Fabiola and Kyle. Expressionism originated in Germany and Austria around 1905 and lasted until about 1925. Expressionism uses distortion and exaggeration for emotional effect. Using distortion and exaggeration of its colors and brushstrokes creates the emotion. Expressionism was one of the main currents of art in the 19th and 20th century. It is also highly speculative, personal, and spontaneous. Each person may see or view and interpret the piece differently than another. Expressionism are the paintings and graphic works which were created in Germany around the turn of the century. Expressionism challenged the academic traditions of the past, which were that artists created their paintings based on what they saw in the world, rather than, with Expressionism, creating it with how they felt. Even though people can say that all art is expressive, during the Expressionist period, they focused mainly on portraying their emotion through their work with color, shapes, and brushstrokes. The term Expressionism is thought to be coined by the Czech historian Antoine Maček, and he created it through the opposite term of Impressionism. Two main groups in this movement came out of this.
Davies was the first of these artistic groups to form with Expressionist views. This group was founded by Ernst Ludwig Kirchner in the city of Dresden in 1905. The artists in this group went against established academic art and the social order of the time, and wanted the freedom to show their individuality through their artwork. The artists in this group used many techniques to show their emotions, including clashing colors, edged forms, and bold outlines. These techniques were used to express their inner conflicts and the anxiety of modern life. In 1913, the group dismantled because Kirchner published a book about the group's inner workings. Many of the artists' works were removed from museums and confiscated by Nazis in 1931.
Der Blue right here was the second Expressionist group to form. It was formed in 1912 in Munich, but also dismantled in that same year. This group was led by Kandinsky and Mark. The artists in this group used colors and shapes to express their emotions. The goal was to allow their artists to display their works freely. The name, the Blue Rider, came from one of Kandinsky's works of a rider on a blue horse.
The style of Expressionism runs deeper than what's on the canvas. The use of intense color, agitated brushstrokes, and disjointed spaces were used to provoke emotions. The emotions came from within the artist and were not a description of the external world. The artists paint what they felt and thought only to express their inner life. The Expressionist artists worked with arbitrary colors and jarring compositions, and new, strong, assertive forms, often violent and distorted colors and lines.
There were many influences on the Expressionist movement. One of these influences was the past movement of Fauvism and Impressionism. These were mainly influenced by their color and their style. Also influencing Expressionism were the artists Cézanne and Gauguin by their color and styles as well. The academic art and the symbolists' art in the 19th century also played a big part in how Expressionists' paintings were created. The changes in society of the change of the century also played a big part, due to the fact of new technologies, urbanization, and altered views of the world. People started seeing the world way differently than before because of this. And after World War II, people fell into a sadness which portrayed through their art. One large influence on Expressionism was the movement Fauvism. Fauvism was from the earliest 20th century, just like Expressionism. Fauvism also used its bold colors and undistinguished brushstrokes, just like Expressionism. However, Fauvism also entered many nature scenes. One of the main artists of Fauvism was Cézanne, which is one of the main influences on Expressionism. Cézanne and Gauguin were also big influences on Expressionism. They were influences by their color, their style, themes, and techniques. Some of their color were similar in the way that their color represented certain things, such as blue represented sadness, red, hate, and other lighter colors were happy and darker colors were saddening. Some of their styles included hectic brushstrokes also. Their themes included nature, and techniques were also the same. You can see many of these styles throughout Expressionism.
There are many differences between Expressionism and the art movement that preceded it, Impressionism. Expressionism was used to capture emotion and has a subjective interpretation. These emotions are captured using bold colors and strong lines. Impressionism focused on the sheer visual appearance of an object. Impressionism used lighter and more happy and realistic colors.
Another influence on the movement of Expressionism was Vincent van Gogh.
Van Gogh influenced the Expressionist artists in many ways. His use of swirling colors and lines to provoke emotion are commonly seen in many Expressionist artworks. Dark and light colors give off a feel of conflicting emotions, and gives the viewer a choice to decide whether or not the painting is happy or sad. Expressionists responded to the formal quality of his paintings and the intensity of his vision when his artworks first emerged after his death.
One of the Expressionist painters was Edvard Munch. In 1905, he was well into the Expressionist style. He played a very important role in the German Expressionism movement and the movements to follow. He is best known as being a Norwegian-born Expressionist painter and printer. You can see strong mental anguish in many of his pieces, such as The Scream. He was raised strictly Christian. He was related to Jacob Munch, another painter, and Peter, a historian. His mom died in 1968 of tuberculosis, and he was raised by his father. His sister also died. Both of these deaths had a very influential way of his art. His dad had a mental illness, and that influenced the way that they were raised. Munch, being raised Christian, was raised with impounding fears of hell and other deep-seated issues. He was influenced by the Impressionist artists Claude Monet, Edouard Manet, and post-Impressionists Vincent van Gogh, Paul Cézanne, and Gauguin. His style falls mainly into post-Impressionism, but he is still considered to be an Expressionist painter. His style is best known as his symbolism. He liked to focus more on the inner meaning and not what the eye could actually see. He painted mainly of how he felt. He represented emotions, and it caused work to show inner feelings, more personal sense of art. Many of his works included life and death, love and terror, and loneliness scenes. Emotion depicted by contrasting lines, dark colors, blocks of colors, somber tones, concise and exaggerated form were the dark side of his art. In his pieces, the tones and shadows depicted how the image was feeling. All of these feelings came from inside of him and were deep-seated. In 1892 to 1909, his works mostly depicted his interest with nature. The tone and color were more cheerful than in his past. In 1982 and 1908, he moved between Paris and Berlin. In 1909, he returned to Norway until his death in 1944. Over 100 paintings were donated to the government after his death to be put into museums and around public buildings. Overall, Munch created about 15,400 prints, 4,500 drawings, and 6 sculptures. One of Munch's most famous pieces was The Scream. So The Scream was created in 1893. Many people consider it to be an autobiographical painting. The Scream, on a walk in nature after his two friends, or the two figures in the back, have left him. The curves of art represent a subjective linear fusion imposed on nature. The foreground objects, distorted by the subjective flow of nature, experience agony and alteration of human personality. This does not resemble him or anyone else, yet it is still an event that he went through. So the creature has been depersonalized and crusted into sexlessness or stamped with trace of femininity, of the world come close to shaming it. This style is called nouveau. Munch realized that there was trouble with the nouveau style and he soon left it. He says that The Scream could only have been painted by a madman. The border is the fence, which preserves the rational world, which is three-dimensional, of holding at the bay of swell of the nouveau curves. The two men in the distance are safe in the natural world and remain masculine. In the foreground, the united natural close to the crossing the fence, yet they are so distorted from the personality of the protagonists. The fence is still protecting them from the total absorption into subjective madness of nature. He got the idea from the sunset that was a bright red while on a walk. He felt like it was a scream that came through nature. He never said why the person was screaming. Another one of Munch's famous paintings is The Yellow Log. Another one of Munch's famous paintings is The Yellow Log. The Yellow Log was painted in 1911. This falls into the time period where Munch painted nature scenes and landscapes. He was also using brighter colors, which was creating a positive emotional effect. The yellow log and the purple trees are believed to represent life and death. The yellow log is stripped of its bark in the center of the picture and is leading towards the back to where the tallest tree is located. This tree is then pointing up into the heavens. The setting of this painting is also pulling us into it because of the way the trees are set up and the log brings us forward into it.
Ernst Ludwig Kirchner was another influential Expressionist painter. He studied architecture and helped found the Artists Association Die Bruck in 1905 and committed himself to painting. In 1906, he met Doris Grobe, and she was his favorite model until 1911. Kirchner's works focused on nude females in nature, expressed in strong and impulsive images. Kirchner voluntarily joined the army, but was soon dismissed after having a nervous breakdown in 1950. Soon after his breakdown, in 1918, he moved to a farmhouse in the Alps, where he mainly painted mountain sceneries until his death. Kirchner's style combined modernist techniques with a focus on nature. Before the army, Kirchner lived in Dresden, Germany. During this time, he changed the color of things like sidewalks and people to show feelings. In his paintings, the sidewalks were painted pink and the faces were painted green. The green faces were used to depict emotionless and lonely people in crowds. This was one of Kirchner's self-portraits. This self-portrait was painted in 1931, and it's about how he feels after the war. The blue and darker tones represent his sadness. The yellow ribbon around his hands could represent how he feels bound or trapped in his mind. The missing half of his face is used to show how he feels like there is a part of him missing after the war. Kirchner often painted Berlin city scenes. Berlin Street was painted in 1913. As you can see, Kirchner is using his unique change of colors to provoke emotion in this painting. The weird angles and mask-like faces are used to show distortion of German society at that time. The two women walking down the street in the front of the painting are prostitutes. Everyone else appear to be in their own little world, and the man on the far right of the painting could possibly be Kirchner himself because he looks lonely.
Franz Marc was also an expressionist painter. He was a German painter and artist, and was considered to be a major influence in the expressionists community. Co-founder of the Blue Rider magazine in 1911, he was founded it with Mack. He was in charge of posting the images and the breaking stories in Germany. Marc also had influences from his father, as he started out as an early age as a landscape painter. Marc also studied at the Academy of Fine Arts in 1990 at the age of 20. In 1903 and 1907, he traveled to Paris, where he went to museums and met many famous artists. He took influences from the Parisian art and their location and other local artists. He copied their styles and techniques to learn how to develop them into his own. Marc also was influenced by many other painters. These painters included Paul Gauguin, Van Gogh, Picasso, and the Mies exhibition in 1910. In 1906, he traveled to Mount Athos and other Greek landmarks, which appear in many of his paintings. He took on the Noir movement, the Nudist Artists Association, and he depicted works of new artists and styles beginning to emerge in Germany and other places around the world. There we go. Marc became fascinated with futuristic style and cubism. This included abstract nature, bold colors, and sharp angles. He created about 60 pieces in lithography. This is the technique where he uses a flat surface as to repel the ink, except where he wanted it. Many involved animals in their natural habitat and setting. He used bold and bright colors. He also used animals' raw emotion and not their no external forces. Marc used the white, yellow, and other lighter colors to represent feminine and joy. He used blue for masculinity and spiritual style. Red often represented violence and a serious undertoning. His works were taken by the Nazis in the early 1930s and removed from exhibits. This included up to about 130 pieces. He was considered to be one of the most influential painters in Germany. He volunteered for the war, but tragically died at age 36 in 1916 while serving the war. One of Mark's most famous pieces is called Blue Horses. Mark's piece, Blue Horses, followed his other two pieces, Red Horses and Yellow Cow. In Blue Horses, it is set up in a semicircular arrangement. In the bulk area, the viewer is close to the action. The painting is symbolically bound to retain the originating conception of the contemporary Blue Rider group. The horse is a symbol of breaking through with emphasis on spirituality of blue and the battling materialism of the red color. The three horses are in reference to the apocalypse, and the no rider on the horse. Mark believes that the supremacy of the animals is over the spirituality of the humans. Another one of his famous paintings is Fighting Forms. Fighting Forms was painted in 1914. This was the last thing that he painted before the war. This painting can be interpreted in many ways. It is often seen as a battle between spirit and matter. The first way that it can be seen is red is the spirit and blue is the matter. But this contradicts his use of color and symbolism. The second way is the red is the matter and the blue is the spirit.
Our third expressionist artist, Emil Nolde, was born in 1807 in the village of Nolde near the Danish border. At the age of 17, he became an apprentice to a wood carver while practicing his skills as a draughtsman. Between 1888 and 1891, Nolde worked as a wood carver and draughtsman in furniture manufacturing. Between 1892 and 1897, he taught technical draughtsmanship at the Industry and Trade Museum. Emil Nolde became fascinated with mountain scenery while giving hiking tours, and he designed many postcards with caricature mountains on them. He became very successful and moved to Munich in 1898 as a painter. Emil Nolde was not allowed into the academy, but he studied privately. He settled in Copenhagen in 1901 and married Ada Vilstrup in 1902. Emil Nolde was very inspired by Matisse, and religion is a common theme seen in his paintings. 55 of his paintings have sacred themes. After marrying Ada, Emil Nolde changed his name to his birthplace. In 1903, they moved to Alzey and spent the winters in Berlin, where he rented a studio. In 1906, Die Bruck asked him to join their group, but differences in age and temperament made him leave Die Bruck 2 years later. Emil Nolde often painted the nightlife of the metropole and studied the art of indigenous people in the Volker-Kudd Museum. He made many watercolors while in the South Pacific with his wife between the years 1913 and 1914. In 1927, they designed and built their own house and studio. In the 1930s, the Nazis confiscated his artwork and named him degenerate. After that, Nolde was banned from painting, but during this time he created a lot of watercolor paintings. He called these his unpainted pictures. Some common themes of his unpainted pictures include incandescent landscapes, dreamlike visions, and strange figures. One of Nolde's paintings is called Harvest Day. Harvest Day was painted in 1905. As you can see, We get a strong Van Gogh influence because of the swirling and cool colors. This painting brings us back to his roots of a northern rural town and gives the viewer a feeling of peace and security. Another one of Emile Noth's most famous works is The Life of Christ. The Life of Christ was painted between 1911 and 1912. As you can see, there's a strong religious theme in this painting. The Life of Christ is considered one of Noth's most famous works of art. This painting starts from Jesus' birth in the top left corner and progresses to show his life and death until the bottom right, which shows the legacy he left behind.
Expressionism also influenced some things. Some of these things include an art, dance, theater, and the movement of neo-expressionism. One thing that Expressionism influenced was art. In art, Expressionism influenced it with its bold colors, weird angles, its brushstrokes. All these three things created emotion within the pieces. It also challenged the normal tradition of art. Before, painters only painted what they saw. Now, Expressionism changed it so they painted what they were feeling. Another thing that Expressionism influenced was dance. In Expressionism dance, you were able to see that their natural bodied movements, created through their own symbolic alphabet, or kintography, expressed their emotions. The way that they expressed their emotions were they took their inner feelings and put them out through their outer movements. They also used costumes to help express how they were feeling in the dance. The third thing Expressionism influenced was the theater. Within the theater, Expressionism could be seen in dreamlike or nightmarish settings. The setting of the theme also included weird shapes and colors, which portrayed the emotion. The plot and structure of the play was very broken and sometimes did not flow. The clipped dialogue of the characters and their individuality or lack thereof also gave to the emotional effect. A lot of times the actors even overacted to portray how they were feeling. The movement Expressionism also created and influenced another movement. This movement was Neo-Expressionism. Neo-Expressionism, or New Expressionism, revived the formal elements of German Expressionism. It took its same style of its harsh brushstrokes, its distorted figures, and its unnatural colors for creating emotional effect and brought them back. It also used to create many cultural mythological scenes, some nationalist historical themes, and erotic settings in many of their paintings. Now it is time to wrap everything up. Overall, Expressionism was influenced by Cézanne, Gauguin, and Van Gogh, and these are some of the main artists that